The heart of the Scourge formation was a nightmare of weapons, fire, and twisted metal, with human ships fighting at ranges so close that their own explosions damaged friendly vessels. And Captain Park Jin-ho watched his fleet die around him while refusing to give a single centimeter of ground. Defiant is gone. His first officer reported, voice hoarse from hours of battle. Resolute is renting atmosphere on 3 decks, and the Tempest just lost main power. Tell the Tempest to use emergency thrusters to maintain position. Park ordered. They can. Still fire missiles on battery backup on his tactical display. The swirling chaos of combat made it almost impossible to tell friend from enemy, but Park could see something that gave him a spark of hope amid the darkness. The Scourge were hesitating. Their movements had become fractionally slower, their attacks less precisely coordinated, and ships that should have pressed their advantage were instead holding back as if uncertain how to proceed. "Captain," Lieutenant Minji said, wonder creeping into her exhausted voice, "I am picking up unusual traffic on Scourge communication frequencies, and they appear to be running the same tactical analysis repeatedly without reaching a conclusion. They cannot figure us out." Park realized their predictive models are based on rational actors who retreat when losses exceed acceptable thresholds. And we keep attacking when we should be running. We are breaking their math. Minji agreed. Park opened a channel to all remaining ships and to the council chamber, ensuring that everyone would hear what he was about to say. "This is Captain Park Jin-ho of the Earth vessel Dauntless, broadcasting to the Scourge fleet and to all who witnessed this battle." He stood up from his command chair, standing tall despite the exhaustion that weighed on every muscle. "We are humanity, and we do not calculate acceptable losses, and we do not measure the worth of lives we protect, and we do not retreat because the odds say we cannot win." He looked directly at the view screen, at the wall of enemy vessels that had expected easy victory and found something they could not comprehend. Come and learn what that means. The Scourge. Central consciousness processed his words through millions of analytical subroutines, attempting to extract tactical data from the human captain's declaration, and found nothing that fit within its existing frameworks. These creatures were not behaving like any species in the Scourge's vast historical database, and every projection of their behavior had proven incorrect. And the consciousness found itself facing something it had never encountered in 60,000 years of existence: uncertainty. 18 human ships remained functional, fighting with the desperate fury of warriors who had accepted death and found it did not diminish their will to resist. And behind them the station hung in space, with 2 million lives depending on their sacrifice. The Scourge ran one final calculation, weighing the cost of continued engagement against the projected value of destroying the station, and the numbers came back with a result that no machine should have been able to reach. Insufficient data for reliable prediction. The enemy could not be modeled, could not be anticipated, could not be defeated through standard tactical application, because they did not follow the rules that made tactical analysis possible. At 6:58 station time, a transmission pulsed through the Scourge fleet from their central consciousness, and every vessel received the same command simultaneously: withdraw and reassess. The Scourge fleet began to pull back, their massive vessels turning away from the battle with the same perfect coordination they had shown in their approach, and within minutes they were accelerating toward the edge of the system on the bridge of the Dauntless. Silence fell as the crew watched their enemy retreat. "They are leaving," Minji whispered, as if speaking too loudly might somehow call them back. "Captain, they are actually leaving." Park sank back into his command chair, feeling the weight of the past hours finally settling onto his shoulders, now that the immediate crisis had passed. "Contact all ships," he said. "Tell them to hold position and begin rescue operations for any crews that can be recovered, and inform the station that the immediate threat has passed." In the council chamber, the representatives of 12 elder species sat in stunned Silence as they watched the Scourge fleet vanish into the darkness of deep space. High Arbiter Rethox was the first to speak, his voice carrying a tone that none of his people had heard from him in centuries of leadership. "They won," he said simply. 18 ships against 500. And they won, not through superior firepower, Counselor Miraset observed, her crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated deep contemplation. Not through better technology or ancient wisdom or any of the things we have always believed make a species powerful. They won because they would not stop, Dexuum said, and for once there was no mockery in his voice, only the quiet admission of someone whose entire understanding of the universe had just been overturned. Rethox rose from his seat and walked slowly toward Ambassador Yoon, who stood apart from the council members with tears still drying on her face. The ancient Kethrani stopped before her and did something that no High Arbiter had done in 11 million years of recorded history. He bowed not the slight inclination of the head that indicated acknowledgement between equals, but a full bow of genuine respect from one being to another who had earned it beyond any doubt. Ambassador Yoon Sera, Rethox said, "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer humanity our deepest gratitude and our sincere apology for the manner in which we treated your people." Yoon accepted the bow with grace, then reached out and gently raised Rethox's head so that his golden eyes met her own. "We did not fight for your apology, High Arbiter, and we did not fight for gratitude or recognition or any of the things we asked for in that petition you denied." "Then why?" Rethox asked. "Because it was right," Yoon replied simply. "Because there were people who needed help, and we were able to provide it. And that is reason enough." The formal ceremony that followed was brief by council standards, but momentous by any measure. With humanity granted full membership, complete trade rights, and recognition of all colony worlds in a unanimous vote that took less than 30 seconds. But it was what happened after the ceremony that Ambassador Yoon would remember for the rest of her life. Captain Park and the surviving crews were brought aboard Nexus Prime for medical treatment and rest. And as they walked through the station's corridors, they found something unexpected waiting for them. Thousands of beings from all 12 council species lined the walls, standing in silence as the battered human warriors passed, and though none of them spoke, the message was clear in every gesture and every expression: respect, freely given, to those who had earned it through sacrifice rather than age or power or ancient wisdom. A young Kathrani child tugged at her parent's hand as Captain Park walked past, and she asked a question in the curious voice of children everywhere. Why did they fight for us when we were mean to them? The parent looked down at her daughter, then at the human captain whose uniform was scorched and whose face was lined with exhaustion, but whose eyes still held the unbreakable light of someone who knew exactly why they had fought, because that is what humans do, the parent said softly. And I think we have much to learn from them. Outside the station's viewports, the first light of artificial sunrise began to break across Nexus Prime, illuminating a galaxy that would never see humanity the same way again. The species that had been mocked as primitive vermin had stood against impossible odds and won not through superior force, but through something far more powerful: the simple human refusal to give up on people worth protecting, even when those people had given them every reason to walk away. Captain Park stopped at a viewport and watched the sunrise paint the stars in shades of gold and amber, and he allowed himself a small smile as he thought about all the crews who had not lived to see this moment. "We did it," he said quietly, speaking to the memory of every warrior who had fallen in the night. "We held the line," and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the Scourge central consciousness continued to process data on the strange species called humanity, running calculation after calculation and finding no model that could predict what they might do next. That uncertainty, the machine realized, was perhaps the most dangerous thing it had ever encountered, because an enemy you could not predict was an enemy you could never truly defeat. The sun continued to rise over Nexus Prime, and humanity had taken its first true step into a galaxy that finally understood what it meant to be human. Space around Nexus Prime had become a storm of fire and metal, with human ships weaving through patterns of destruction that would have seemed like chaos to any observer, but flowed with the deadly precision of warriors who had trained for exactly this kind of desperate fight. Captain Park Jin-ho gripped the arms of his command chair as the Dauntless shuddered under another impact, watching his tactical display as green dots representing human ships blinked out one by one against the overwhelming red mass of the Scourge fleet. Destroyer Indomitable is gone, Captain, his first officer reported, voice steady despite the loss. The Relentless and Fury are reporting critical damage. Tell them to fall back to secondary positions, Park ordered, and have the Valiant and Horizon move to cover their retreat. On the view screen, a human frigate exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its crew of 87 souls vanishing in an instant, and Park felt each death like a physical blow to his heart, even as he forced himself to focus on the larger battle. The Scourge fought with mathematical perfection, their movements coordinated by a central consciousness that processed tactical data faster than any organic mind could match. And they had clearly expected the battle to be over within minutes. They had not expected humans. Captain, the Scourge are adjusting their formation, Lieutenant Haminji announced from her communication station. They seem to be having difficulty predicting our movements. Good, Park replied. That means our tactical doctrine is working. So all ships continue random pattern alpha, and remember to never do the same thing twice. The human fleet had trained for years in tactics specifically designed to confuse predictive algorithms, movements that made no logical sense from a cost-benefit perspective, attacks that risked more than they should have gained, retreats that turned into ambushes and charges that dissolved into feints. The elder species of the galaxy fought wars like chess, with careful positioning and calculated exchanges. But humans had learned long ago that sometimes you had to flip the board in the council chamber. The gathered representatives of 12 ancient civilizations watched the battle unfold on massive display screens, and their expressions ranged from disbelief to something approaching awe. They are insane, Counselor Thexuum said, watching a human cruiser deliberately ram a Scourge vessel 3 times its size, destroying both ships in a catastrophic explosion. They are throwing away their lives for no tactical advantage. Look again, High Arbiter Rethox replied quietly, his golden eyes fixed on the display. That cruiser destroyed a Scourge command node. And observe how the enemy vessels in that sector have become less coordinated. He was right, and the other council members could see it now. The way human captains were targeting the connections between Scourge ships rather than the ships themselves, disrupting the machine consciousness's ability to function as a unified whole. They are not fighting the fleet, Councilor Miraset realized, her crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated surprise. They are fighting the mind behind it. On the bridge of the destroyer Starfall, Lieutenant Choi Yoonji watched her damage readouts climb into critical ranges and made a decision that no computer would ever understand. All hands. This is Lieutenant Choi, she announced over the ship's intercom. We have lost main propulsion and our weapons are down to 12% capacity. And command doctrine says we should withdraw to protect our remaining combat effectiveness. She paused, looking at her crew, at the young faces that looked back at her with trust and determination. But there is a Scourge command vessel directly ahead of us. And if we can reach it before we lose power completely, we can take it with us. So I am asking for volunteers only because what I am about to do goes beyond orders. Every hand on the bridge went up. Yoonji smiled. the expression of a woman who had found peace with her choice. And she directed all remaining power to engines. Starfall to Fleet Command, she transmitted. Beginning final approach on target, designation 77. And it has been an honor serving with you all. The Starfall accelerated toward the massive Scourge command vessel, dodging weapons fire through maneuvers that should have torn the damaged ship apart. And when impact finally came, the explosion lit up the void like a new star being born in the council chamber. Dexuum made a sound that might have been a sob. She chose to die, he whispered. She had a chance to retreat and live. And she chose to die instead. She chose to give her death meaning, Rethox corrected. And there was something different in his voice now. Something that sounded almost like respect. There is a distinction that I am only beginning to understand. Ambassador Yoon Sarah stood among the council members, watching the battle alongside them. And when she saw the Starfall's sacrifice, she felt tears running down her cheeks even as pride swelled in her heart. Ambassador, Rethox said. Turning to face her, I must ask you a question that I do not know how to answer myself. Ask. Yoon replied. Why do they fight so hard? Rethox asked. Our defensive fleet withdrew to protect the station rather than engage, following standard tactical doctrine that prioritizes asset preservation. But your ships keep attacking despite losses that any rational analysis would call unacceptable. So why? Yoon considered the question carefully before responding. Because humans do not calculate acceptable losses, High Arbiter. And we do not measure the worth of the lives we protect against the cost of protecting them. That is not logical. No, Yoon agreed. It is not on the tactical display. The human fleet had been reduced to 31 ships, less than half their original number. And the Scourge still fielded over 500 vessels, despite the significant damage the humans had inflicted. Captain, Minji reported, a voice cracking with exhaustion. Earth Command responds to our status update. And they say reinforcements are 12 hours away. 12 hours, Park thought. When they might not survive 12 minutes, he opened a channel to all remaining ships. Fleet, this is Captain Park. And I want you all to know that what you have done tonight will be remembered for as long as humanity exists. But our fight is not over. He took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to order would likely be the last command he ever gave. All ships, execute Protocol Songbird on my mark. Protocol Songbird was not a retreat or a defensive formation, and it was not designed to minimize casualties or preserve combat effectiveness. It was a final offensive, a concentrated charge directly into the heart of the enemy formation, fighting at ranges so close that the Scourge's numerical advantage would be neutralized by the chaos of point-blank combat. It was a protocol designed for warriors who had accepted that they would not survive, but who refused to die without making their deaths count. All ships confirmed ready. His first officer reported. Park looked at the Scourge fleet one final time, at the hundreds of enemy vessels that stood between his people and the station they had sworn to protect, and he felt no fear. Only a quiet certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. Mark, he said. 31 human ships surged forward into the heart of darkness, and the night reached its darkest hour as humanity prepared to make its final stand. The council chamber had transformed from a place of ancient arrogance into a scene of barely controlled panic, with representatives of 12 elder species speaking over each other in voices that ranged from terrified to furious. And Ambassador Yoon Sarah stood among them, feeling strangely calm as the world fell apart around her. How did we not detect them? Councillor Thexuum demanded, his gelatinous body quivering with agitation rather than laughter now. Our sensors should have seen them coming from 10 light years away. They masked their emissions perfectly, a Kathrani technician reported, a voice trembling in a way that Yoon had not thought possible for that species. No heat signatures, no communication traffic. No energy output of any kind. And our systems were never designed to detect gravitational displacement alone, because no one has used such primitive detection methods in millions of years. Counselor Miraset snapped, her crystalline form pulsing with angry red light. Why would we look for something that no advanced civilization would ever need? High Arbiter Vrethox raised one hand and the chamber fell silent, the weight of his authority still commanding respect, even as fear clouded every face in the room. Recrimination served no purpose, he said, and his voice had regained some of its cold composure. We must focus on immediate response. So what defensive capabilities do we have available? The answer came from a military advisor of the Ovani species, and his crystalline voice carried the hollow sound of someone delivering very bad news. We have 47 military vessels within response range. High Arbiter, mostly ceremonial escorts and diplomatic security craft. As the main council fleet is scattered across the galaxy, responding to various minor disputes. 47 ships against 800, Dexuum said, and now his voice held no mockery at all. Only the raw edge of terror. We cannot fight them. We cannot flee in time. We are dead. We are all dead. What are they? Yoon asked, stepping forward into the center of the chamber. Your historical databases must have some record of vessels matching this design. Vrethox turned to look at her, and in his golden eyes she saw something she had never expected to see in a Catherine. Uncertainty. They are the scourge of Valthex, he said. A machine consciousness that devastated a quarter of the galaxy 60,000 years ago. And our ancestors believed them destroyed in the Great Purging. But it appears they were merely dormant. A machine consciousness, Yoon repeated. So they think, they adapt, they learn, they calculate, Vrethox corrected. They analyze threats and respond with mathematical precision. And 60,000 years ago, it took a coalition of hundreds of worlds and millions of ships to force them into retreat. And we do not have hundreds of worlds or millions of ships. You have 63 ships, Yoon said. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was different, filled with confusion rather than fear. I do not understand, Vrethox said. Humanity has 63 combat vessels within immediate range, Yoon explained. They've been preparing for the past 3 hours while your council debated whether to listen to our warning. And they are ready to fight. 63 human ships, Dexuum laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. What difference could 63 primitive human vessels possibly make against 800 Scourge warships? More difference than 47 ceremonial escorts, Yoon replied calmly. And our ships are not ceremonial, Counselor, as they were built for war because humans never forgot that the universe is dangerous even when others convinced themselves that danger was a thing of the past. She stepped closer to Vrethox, looking up at the ancient being who had dismissed her species as vermin just hours ago. High Arbiter, I am authorized to offer humanity's protection to this station and everyone aboard it, with no conditions and no demands. No conditions, Vrethox repeated, clearly not believing what he was hearing. None, Yoon confirmed. 2 million people live on Nexus Prime, and their leader's arrogance does not make their lives worthless. So we will fight for them because it is right, not because we expect anything in return. Vrethox stared at her for a long moment, his 4 golden eyes searching her face for some sign of deception or hidden agenda, and finding nothing but simple human determination. Why? He finally asked. We mocked you. We denied your petition. We called your species vermin. So why would you die for us? Because someone has to, Yoon said. And because that is what humans do. She turned and walked toward the chamber exit, then paused at the doors to look back one final time. Stay out of our way, High Arbiter, and watch closely, because you are about to learn something that your 11 million years of superior wisdom never taught you. 20 minutes later, The human fleet emerged from the Veros Nebula in perfect combat formation. Captain Park Jin-ho stood on the bridge of the Dauntless, watching his ships take position between the station and the approaching wall of enemy vessels. And he felt the familiar cold focus of a warrior preparing for battle settle into his bones. All ships report ready. Captain, his first officer announced, communication from the lead Scourge vessel. Sir, Lieutenant Haminji added from her station. They are broadcasting a standard analysis query, requesting tactical data on our fleet composition. Let them wonder, Park replied. All ships, maintain formation and hold fire until my command. And remember what we are fighting for, on the view screen. The Scourge fleet continued its approach. 800 vessels of angular black metal moving with the perfect synchronization of machines that shared a single mind. And behind them, the endless darkness of space stretched out like a promise of oblivion. Park checked the station's chronometer and noted the time. 3:47 in the artificial night cycle, with sunrise scheduled for 7:12, less than 4 hours to hold the line. Captain, Minji said, her voice tight with tension. Scourge vessels are powering weapons. All ships. Battle stations, Park announced, and his voice carried across the fleet through every speaker and every communicator. This is Captain Park Jin-ho of the Earth vessel Dauntless. And I want every one of you to remember something as we go into this fight. He paused, looking at the wall of enemy ships that filled his view screen, calculating odds that any reasonable person would call impossible. The beings on that station called us primitive. He continued. They said we were vermin, that we had nothing to offer their advanced civilization. So tonight we show them what primitives can do. And tonight we show them what vermin are capable of when the stakes are high enough. The first Scourge weapons fired. Beams of terrible energy lancing across the void toward the human fleet. And the battle for Nexus Prime began in earnest behind the thin line of human ships. 2 million civilians watched through viewports and sensor feeds as the species they had mocked prepared to die for them. And in the council chamber, High Arbiter Vrethok sat in silence as he witnessed something his ancient logic could not explain. Humans charging towards certain death with weapons blazing and hearts unafraid. The longest night had begun. The corridors of Nexus Prime were beautiful in the way that only truly ancient things could be beautiful. Their walls, lined with art and artifacts from civilizations that had risen and fallen while humanity still lived in caves. And Ambassador Yum Sira walked through them with urgent purpose while station residents watched her pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. She had requested an emergency session with the council 4 times in the past hour, and 4 times her request had been denied with increasingly dismissive responses. The 5th denial came with a personal message from High Arbiter Vrethok himself, transmitted directly to her communicator in his cold, precise voice. Ambassador, the Council has concluded its business with humanity for this cycle, and your continued requests for audience are becoming an annoyance. So I suggest you return to your vessel and reflect on the wisdom of acceptance. Yoon stopped in the middle of a corridor lined with sculptures that depicted the great victories of the elder species. Monuments to wars fought and won before Earth had continents. And she took a deep breath before responding, High Arbiter, with respect. I am not requesting an audience to discuss humanity's petition, as I am attempting to warn the Council of an imminent threat to this station and everyone aboard it. A long pause followed, and when Vrethok spoke again, his tone had shifted from dismissive to something closer to annoyed. What threat could humanity possibly have detected that our own systems have not? He asked. Our deep space monitoring stations have identified a fleet of over 800 vessels approaching this station from the direction of the Galactic Rim, Yoon replied. They are running silent with all emissions masked. but they cannot hide their gravitational signature. And at current speed, they will arrive in approximately 5 hours. Another pause, longer this time. And Yoon allowed herself a small hope that perhaps the Catherine's famous logic would overcome his obvious prejudice. Ambassador, Rethox finally said, the Cathrani operate the most advanced sensor network in the galaxy. A network that has protected Council space for 11 million years. And our systems show no such fleet, because your systems are designed to detect energy signatures and communication traffic. Yoon pressed. This fleet is using neither, but mass cannot be hidden. And our gravimetric sensors clearly show. Your primitive instruments are detecting cosmic noise. Rethox interrupted. Perhaps solar winds distorting background radiation. Perhaps the gravitational echo of a distant black hole. But certainly not a fleet that our sensors cannot see. High Arbiter, please. I am asking you to simply verify our readings with your own gravimetric analysis. And if we are wrong, then you have lost nothing but a few minutes. But if we are right, enough. Rethox cut her off again, his voice now carrying clear irritation. The Council will not reconvene based on the hysterical claims of a species that was just denied membership. And if this is some desperate human trick to force reconsideration of your petition, then I warn you that it will result in permanent expulsion from galactic space. The connection closed before Yoon could respond. She stood alone in the corridor of ancient victories, surrounded by the achievements of species who had conquered stars while her ancestors hunted with wooden spears. And she felt the weight of their dismissal pressing down on her like a physical force. But Yoon had not been chosen as humanity's ambassador because she gave up easily. She made her way to a private communication alcove and contacted her ship directly. Captain Park. Status report. Captain Park Jinho's face appeared on her screen. His expression calm, but his eyes showing the focused intensity of a man preparing for battle. The Dauntless is fully powered, and all weapons systems are running diagnostics, Ambassador. And I have quietly informed the other human vessels in the system to begin similar preparations. How many ships do we have available? Yoon asked. 63 combat-capable vessels within immediate range, with the main fleet hidden in the Veros Nebula as planned. Yoon nodded. Knowing that 63 ships against an unknown fleet of 800 was not a battle any sane commander would want to fight, but also knowing that sanity had never been humanity's defining characteristic, Earth Command's orders. She asked, "Protect the station regardless of political consequences," Park replied. "They made it very clear that we are not to let 2 million civilians die just because their leaders are fools. The Council will see our preparations as a threat." "Let them," Park said. And there was something almost like anticipation in his voice. "Ambassador, my crews are ready, and they know what is coming, even if the Council does not. And I promise you that whatever emerges from that darkness will have to go through us first." Yoon thanked him and closed the connection, then made one final attempt to reach someone who might listen. She found High Arbiter Rethox in his private quarters, a space of perfect geometric precision that reflected the Kithrani devotion to order and logic. And he regarded her arrival with the closest thing to surprise his species could express. "Ambassador, this intrusion is highly irregular. High Arbiter, I apologize for the breach of protocol. But I need you to understand that I am not lying, and I am not mistaken," Yoon said. "In 4 hours, something terrible is going to arrive at this station. And if we do not prepare, millions of people are going to die." Rethox studied her with his 4 golden eyes. And for a moment, Yoon thought she saw something shift in his ancient days. Perhaps a flicker of doubt, or the beginning of genuine consideration. But then his expression hardened again. "Ambassador Yoon, the Cathrani have protected this galaxy for 11 million years. And we have faced threats that your species cannot imagine. And we have prevailed through logic, through preparation. Through the application of superior knowledge and technology, he moved closer to her, his scaled form towering over her small human frame. If there were a threat approaching the station, we would know, and the fact that we do not know tells me that there is no threat. Only human desperation manifesting as fantasy. And if you are wrong, Yoon asked quietly. I am not wrong, Rethox replied. I am Kethrani. Yoon left his quarters, knowing that no more words would change his mind. And she returned to the Dauntless to stand beside Captain Park on the bridge as the hours counted down. The artificial night of Nexus Prime deepened around them. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the fleet drew closer at 3 hours and 47 minutes before projected arrival. The first visual confirmation came through on human sensors. A wall of vessels emerging from the shadows of deep space like a tide of metal and malice station. Alarms began to sound throughout Nexus Prime, their wailing cry echoing through corridors. That had not heard such warnings in living memory, Yoon watched through the bridge view screen as the Council species finally saw what their superior sensors had failed to detect. 800 ships of terrible design, moving with perfect coordination toward a station that had almost no defenses ready. Her communicator chimed with an incoming priority message from the Council Chamber Ambassador. Yoon, said the voice of High Arbiter Rethox. And for the first time in 11 million years of Kethrani history, his words carried the unmistakable tone of fear. We need to talk. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched upward like a cathedral made of starlight and ancient stone. Its walls carved with the histories of 12 elder species who had ruled the galaxy for longer than humanity had possessed fire. Ambassador Yoon Sera stood alone at the petitioner's platform, a single human woman facing the most powerful beings in known space. And she kept her spine straight and her expression calm despite the weight of their collective stares. The council members sat in elevated pods arranged in a perfect circle around her, each pod designed to reflect the biology and preferences of its occupant. And from these heights, they looked down at her like gods examining an insect that had wandered into their temple. High Arbiter Rethox of the Kethrani occupied the central and highest pod, his gray-scaled form motionless except for the slow blink of his 4 golden eyes. And when he spoke, his voice carried the cold precision of a species that had abandoned emotion as inefficient 10,000 years ago. The Galactic Council recognizes the petition of the human species, Rethox announced, and the words echoed through the chamber with all the warmth of a glacier. You have requested full membership, trade rights, and recognition of your colony worlds after 20 standard years of probationary status. And you may now present your case. Yoon bowed her head in the formal gesture she had practiced for months, a show of respect to traditions older than human civilization. And then she raised her eyes to meet the High Arbiter's gaze without flinching. Honored council members, she began, her voice steady and clear. Humanity comes before you not to beg, but to offer partnership. And in our 20 years among the stars, we have proven ourselves capable of peace, of trade, of cooperation with species vastly different from ourselves. She activated her presentation display, showing images of human colonies thriving alongside alien settlements, of trade vessels moving peacefully through contested space, of human doctors treating patients of a dozen different species. We have much to contribute, Yoon continued. Our creativity, our adaptability, our determination to solve problems that others consider impossible. And we ask only for the chance to stand as equals among the community of civilized worlds. Silence followed her words. And then Councillor Thexum of the Velari began to laugh. The sound started as a wet, gurgling noise from his bulbous throat sac and built into a full-bodied cackle that shook his massive frame. And soon other council members joined him, their various forms of laughter creating a chorus of mockery that filled the ancient chamber equals, Dexuum repeated when he could speak again, his gelatinous body quivering with amusement. This creature speaks of standing as our equal. He waved one tentacle, and the display changed without Yoon's permission, replacing her carefully prepared images with footage she recognized immediately and wished she did not. War. Endless war. Human beings killing each other with weapons primitive and advanced across centuries of bloody history. Cities burning, children crying, soldiers dying in mud and snow and sand. This is humanity, Dexuum announced to the chamber. Aggressive primates who spent most of their existence slaughtering each other over patches of dirt and differences in skin pigmentation. The footage shifted to show environmental destruction. Forests falling, oceans filling with poison, the atmosphere of Earth itself growing sick from human industry. They nearly destroyed their own world before they even reached the stars. Councillor Miraset of the Orvani added, her crystalline form pulsing with colors that indicated disgust. What wisdom could such a species possibly offer us? Yoon forced herself to remain still, to keep her hands from clenching into fists, to maintain the diplomatic composure that had been drilled into her through years of training. Every species has a troubled history, she responded, keeping her voice level. What matters is how we have grown beyond those troubles. Grown, Rethok said, and somehow his emotionless tone cut deeper than the open mockery of the others. Your species has existed for perhaps 300,000 years. And you have possessed spaceflight for barely 2 centuries. And in that time you have fought 4 wars among yourselves and nearly triggered 2 more. He leaned forward in his pod, his golden eyes fixed on her with cold analytical interest. The Kathrani achieved spaceflight 11 million years ago. He continued, the Velari, 9 million. And the youngest species on this council reached the stars before your ancestors learned to plant seeds in soil. So tell me, Ambassador, what could humanity possibly understand about civilization that we have not already learned and surpassed? Perhaps a fresh perspective, Yoon offered. But even she could hear how weak the words sounded against the weight of such vast ages. Dexuum laughed again, a cruel wet sound that made other council members shift uncomfortably in their pods. Fresh perspective, he repeated. Like vermin, offering fresh perspective to those who build palaces. And I move that humanity be denied full membership and that their probationary status be extended indefinitely. I second the motion, Miraset added, and further suggest that humans be restricted to their home system until they demonstrate actual civilized behavior. Perhaps in another 10,000 years. The vote proceeded quickly, each council member signaling their agreement with gestures appropriate to their species. And when Vrethox announced a unanimous decision, his voice carried no satisfaction and no regret. Only the cold statement of fact. The petition of humanity is denied, he declared. This session is concluded. Yoon bowed again because protocol demanded it, and she turned to walk the long path back to the chamber's exit with the sound of alien laughter following her like a physical weight on her shoulders. She had almost reached the doors when her personal communicator vibrated against her wrist, a priority signal that cut through the diplomatic dampening field that normally blocked such transmissions. The message was short, encrypted in codes that only the highest levels of Earth's government could access. And when she read the words, her heart went cold. Situation Blackthorn confirmed. And you have 6 hours. Yoon stopped walking and closed her eyes for just a moment. And when she opened them again, her expression had changed from diplomatic calm to something harder and more focused. She turned back to look at the council chamber, at the ancient beings who had just finished mocking her species. And she knew something that they did not. Deep space monitoring stations positioned far beyond the edge of known space had detected something massive moving through the darkness. A fleet of unknown vessels numbering in the hundreds, and they were heading directly toward this. station at speeds that should have been impossible. The Council's own sensors had not detected the threat because they relied on energy signatures and communication intercepts. But humans had learned long ago not to trust only one method of observation. Human stations detected gravitational ripples, the subtle bending of space-time that no amount of emissions masking could hide. And what they had found was coming fast. Yoon walked out of the chamber and immediately contacted her ship. "Captain Park," she said when the connection opened. "Initiate protocol whisper and begin quiet preparations. Because in approximately 5 hours this station is going to need our help whether they want it or not." "Understood, Ambassador," came the reply. And the Council, Yoon looked back one more time at the doors that had just closed behind her, sealing the most powerful beings in the galaxy inside their chamber of ancient arrogance. "They will learn soon enough," she said. "And I suspect they will not enjoy the lesson." The first rays of artificial morning light were just beginning to fade toward the station's program night cycle. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 800 vessels of terrible and ancient design continued their silent approach toward a galaxy that had forgotten the meaning of fear.